Greetings, fellow humans. Bad Mark here with another transmission from Metre Keyboards, and today I'm doing a video that I actually wanted to do a while ago because this is something that affected me when I first got into the hobby, because the first hot swappable keyboard that I had was a Red Dragon with Otemu sockets, just like this. And I mean, me being naive about what had been going on in the hobby up until then, I didn't know that, I mean, there was already Kato hot swap sockets available. I think they're the first that came out with the style that are basically on all of the hot swap keyboards nowadays, but there are still some affordable keyboards that use Otemu hot swap sockets. And I mean, I don't know if Otemu uses, and I don't even know if they're actually Otemu, they just became the name. They're actually called Milmac sockets. They come in a 0305 and a 0705, being different material and I think different depth. Basically, these are taken, and you can use, if you have a soldered keyboard PCB like I do. So this is devastating, the TKL. This is a TKL that when I first really started diving into the hobby, the devastating TKL was definitely a keyboard that was top 5 on my list. It was probably just below the SAT 75 in as far as keyboards that I wanted to get, but it was just a little too much to invest in my opinion. At the time, I started out with much cheaper keyboards, so spending 10 times what I usually spent on a keyboard was like, it was hard to justify. But this past Black Friday, they had some crazy sales. So I got this keyboard in a WKL, which is my first WKL, with switches and keycaps for a phenomenal price. It was just silly. Now, I know this is an older keyboard. The date on the PCB is actually December 2019, but being as it's a keyboard that I've wanted for quite some time, and it was such a good deal, I couldn't pass it up. This is the PCB for the devastating TKL. It only comes in a solder edition. So you can see that, yes, there's options for different layouts, but what if I'd like to take advantage of those different options? Well, what I'm going to be doing is installing Milmac sockets, which are these. These is what they look like installed. Now, I've got a few. This is going to be a while before I get to this video, so it's not going to be in a hurry, but kind of just gets to the point of what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to be putting those sockets inside all of the possible layouts, so that when I go to build a keyboard, as long as I'm using a switch that has an SMD window so that it'll fit over the LED, and I'm using a switch that, in a second I'll show you, the majority of switches, including Gatorons, will work and do fit in Milmac sockets. There is an exception to that, but we'll get to that here in a little bit. So I'm going to be installing these Milmac sockets that will allow me to basically, change out switches as I go. I'm one to like to change things out here and there, and especially if this becomes one of my daily drivers. When I have new switches, I'll probably be loading them up in there so that I can get a feel, for using them after a while. So I'd like to be able to have, the option to switch out switches without having to desolder the entire board, because that's just a lot of work. Now, when I first really started diving into this hobby, I had a few Red Dragon boards, like the Kamara, the K552, the K551 full size. I had a number of these Yusu boards, the Z11 boards, which I built a lot of these and modded a lot of these along the way and given them away. A lot of my family members have one of these that I've made for them, because I was just like, especially at how cheap they were. This is the, let's say the white or the LED or the yellow. It's a single color LED version. But like I said, I've got the LEDs I'm going to be adding to that, but I need to use the SMD windows. Now, here's one thing that I just want to point out for some folks, because I get this question a lot. Like, why is there a hole at the bottom of my switch and does it matter? Well, you have switches like this from Cherry, from Gatoron, these higher end switches, the ones that cost, 50, 60 cents a switch. They're usually just going to have those 4 little dots you see there, or those 4 little holes you see at the bottom of the switch. That's actually meant for through-hole LEDs. That means LEDs that actually come in through the top, and each of those legs, because an LED needs 4 leads, one for red, one for green, one for blue, one for signal, so that it can control the color, set the hue, saturation, all of that. Now, I personally cannot recall ever seeing a build that somebody actually, did that. I actually have a keyboard that has those through-hole LEDs, and I don't know. I mean, it's a TKL, so we're talking 87 keys and basically 6 solder points per key. Basically 9 times 6. 500 solder joints. That's just a little bit more solder than personally. Don't get me wrong. I'm going to be soldering the Milmax sockets, all right, but it's going to give me the ability to change switches. Now, one thing, like I said, when I first started diving into this, all I had really were the Red Dragon switches that came with my Red Dragons and the Otemu switches that came with the EUSUs, and I wanted to get some good switches, so I started reading up, started looking at, videos, reading blogs, reading Reddit, and what I got as a fairly consistent message across the board was that Gatoron yellow switches are good. So I was like, all right, well, I want Gatoron linear switches, yellow linear switches, because it had the right weight, because I already had some reds and they were a little lighter, and I was like, oh, okay, a little bit more weight, that means I can rest my hands on the keys. And I was like, just super excited. I went to Novel Keys, placed an order for some Gatoron yellows, and got them delivered pretty quick too. I was like, yay, I'm now part of the community. I took off my keycaps. I had a build in mind. I'm like, oh, this is going to look so good. It's going to sound so good. I was just ready to go, and I started putting switches in. But by the 3rd or 4th switch, I just started noticing that it felt weird. I was like, what's going on? Now, thankfully, I kind of caught it at that point, because I was only 4 switches in, 3-4 switches in, and I pulled it out. And when I end up pulling out, is one switch, one pin is fine. It's nice and straight. The other one was a crumpled mess. And that was for every single switch along, the new Gatoron switches that I just got. And I was like, is there something wrong with my switches? I was so just confused. And because I didn't have the terminology with everything, Google wasn't much help, because, when this was going on, the Kale hot swap sockets were fairly new, and they weren't in many, if any, off-the-shelf boards. They were, I think, right back then, they were only on like group buy boards. So a lot of the videos that had hot swap was like this with the Milmax, and I saw people using switches. Now, I didn't see Gatorons, but I didn't specifically look. I was just like, am I inserting the switches wrong? Am I doing something wrong? Is the switch wrong? I didn't know. And I'm trying to use the switches that I bought from you, and they don't work in my keyboard. They don't fit. One pin goes in, the other pin always comes out folded up or crumpled. And I got a reply that was so... I was just, obviously I don't recall it verbatim, but it was to the point, paraphrasing, that I didn't know what I was doing, and that Gatorons don't fit in Milmax sockets, got the wrong switches, they're not going to work in that keyboard. And I felt really bad. I didn't like how I felt, and I was just, don't get me wrong, I've been in IT most of my career in one way or the other, but I have to work with people. And don't get me wrong, I've had to deal with people that were not nice, but there's just, I don't know, a decorum that you would keep. You know, and just, I mean, if it gets to the point that they're screaming and yelling at you, okay, you just hang up. There's no reason to take it personally. There's no reason to, you know, get upset. They're more upset with the company. They're more upset with the situation they're in, you know, so forth. So I don't know. I knew kind of customer care was kind of, especially when I was in the field and, you know, just showing up at different offices, fixing people's computers and having to deal with, you know, all types of personalities day in and day out. You know, just sometimes you got, I mean, the majority of people, amazing, sweet, you know, they would feed me sometimes. They, you know, especially those businesses that I went to often because they knew that I would solve the problem. I wasn't the kind of guy that, you know, unfortunately there was some tech companies I worked at that they couldn't figure it out. They'd burn some hours and they'd be like, I'm going to have to send somebody else out after burning like 4 hours just doodle daddling around. But I digress. The way that the email came back to me, it was like accusing me of purchasing the wrong product, you know, and I'm like, because I mean, I looked back on the page and it didn't say that these weren't compatible with, you know, Otemu hot swap sockets. And that was the norm for hot swap sockets back then, because I mean, this keyboard is a reason that I had particularly picked out the keyboards that I did, because I had bought a few soldered keyboards and I was like, I don't want to get into desoldering. I didn't even have an iron at that point because I hadn't really done much soldering, desoldering in a few years. So I just didn't have the equipment. I mean, I think I might have had an old soldering iron, but one with a tip that had probably been rusted to the shaft already. So I wanted to, because I was just getting into it, I didn't want to invest into a soldering iron and invest the time and the effort, you know, soldering a whole board and then installing switches that I might not like. So I specifically, you know, looked for hot swap because the listing didn't tell me. And I mean, don't get me wrong, most listings don't say, you know, that this switch is compatible with all hot swap sockets, or this switch is only compatible with Kale style hot swap sockets. It's kind of just left to the consumer, and I feel like many are left in the dark. So, long story short, even though I already made the long story, so I guess that's kind of besides the point. Most MX compatible switches will work in Otemu hot swap sockets, even Gateron. There are two exceptions that I have personally found. I have switches, I believe, from every manufacturer. I've gone through this. I've spent the time. I've actually been preparing for this video for a little while now. And I've only been able to find two switches, or switches from two different manufacturers, because I can compare across a couple of them. Like the first one is Kale. Kale switches, on their regular non-box switches, they have a silver pin and they have that copper pin. Now that pin is wider than that pin. And that's the problem and why these type of switches don't work. Now, obviously, if I wanted to insert this and if it had pins to the right, I'd obviously have to clip off the plastic pins because that's only a 3-slot. But it has the window, it has everything else. But this pin, it is thicker than this pin. That is the rule of thumb. If you're looking at it with the switch towards you, the pins towards you, and the right pin is wider than the left pin, it's not going to work in an Otemu hot swap socket. You say, well, what about with the other ones? All right. There are some switches that, like here is a switch from Novel Keys. It's a Novel Keys Black Silk. I think that's what they were called. But one thing gives me the impression that they are manufactured by Gateron. And that's the fact that the pin on the right has the tip pinched. I mean, that's the best way that I can describe it. It looks like something has been done to the tip of that switch. This is a Novel Key Black Silk. I believe it's manufactured by Gateron, but I'm not positive. If you notice, the right and left pin, and you can actually take out your caliper and measure. They're actually the same width, but I don't know if you can tell, but the top of the right pin is pinched. That pinch and that flatten it out kind of just spreads it out a little bit, and that's what's actually preventing it from going into the socket. Now, this one, thankfully, is not a surface mount diode, so we don't have to worry about having an SMD window. I mean, obviously, we're going to block off the light, but if we wanted to stick this switch into this keyboard, this is all we need to do. Now, these are called side cutters. If you've done any 3D printing, you've got some of these. If you do any type of work with keyboards, plastic, electronics, anything, you probably got a pair of these. If you don't, they're very useful. They're called side cutters, and they're pretty cheap. You can usually get them for just a few bucks on Amazon. But these are great for doing this. And we have the switch facing us, and we see that tip is pinched. We're going to want to basically cut off that pinched tip. We can do it at an angle because we want to cut off as little as possible. Obviously, we want to still make contact. We want to make sure that our side cutters are sharp. Having dull ones, you're just going to end up messing up that switch. Now, obviously, you know, this is non-reversible, and I would recommend that you have at least a few spare switches to test yourself and, you know, verify before going all in. But that should be a disclaimer on every YouTube video. Like, I'm not a professional. I just play one on YouTube. It really should be a disclaimer on a lot of videos, especially science-based ones. Or anyway, so now that we have that little tip cut off, now obviously we're not going to be able to go in. Again, I've done this myself. But like, why doesn't it fit? Because I figured this out a while ago. Like I said, I've been planning this video for a while. Why I haven't made it, it's just beyond me. We use those side clippers to go ahead and snip off those plastic pins because we don't have the spot for them, and we want to make sure they're nice and flush as possible. But they shouldn't interfere even if there's a little nub there. But now we have the one pin on the left. We've left it untouched because that fits. Now that we've cut off that tip off the right one, and we make sure that it's nice and straight, we can go ahead and line it up and push in. Now, Otemu sockets do require a little bit of force, not too much. If you're pressing too hard, something is in the way, pull back. But because it's going into, the sockets are basically meant for like EEPROM chips. So they're not necessarily meant for these pins, but they, you know, kind of work. So now obviously you're going to want to test that switch works, but you should be able to just pull the switch out and see, all right, I don't have a bent pin, meaning that works. But let's go ahead and kind of bent it on the way out. Go ahead and put it back in. Yep, and works. So now we've gone from a switch that we couldn't use in this keyboard, or well, I mean, obviously without the window, I'm not going to be able to use on my Devastating, but we do have plenty that do have the window. Oh, now I got to find one. So here we have a Gateron Yellow, just your standard run-of-the-mill. I lubed it, 3-pin, one of the older Gaterons. I think I might have pulled this from the keyboard, I'm not sure. But you can see the tip of that right pin is pinched, making that wider. So again, I'm going to take these side cutters, I'm going to basically just rest them on the side of the switch. I'm going to take a little angle off. Yes, I see better without my glasses. Don't ask. I'm going to make sure to have the tip, just the tip. And and I'm going to snip it off. One fell swoop. I like to do it at a bit of an angle so it leaves a point. But at that point, as long as the pins are straight, you should be able to line it up. And usually kind of tipping it forward first and then kind of getting it back. It's kind of, I don't know, there's a trick to these, I guess. But you do have to apply a little pressure. Not too much. If it's fighting back too much, I'd pull back. But it should slide right on in. Now, before pulling it out, let me just see. Plug it in real quick. And it works. And there's a Gatoron switch and no Temu hot swap socket. Now, there's many switch manufacturers out there, but thankfully, there's a lot that do actually work. And especially right now, there's a lot of them becoming a little bit more popular. So this is a switch from Kinetic Labs. I want to say it's the Husky. I believe it's the Husky. Anyway, it's manufactured by HMX, if I'm not mistaken. But we've got 5 pins, so we've got to cut off the plastic ones. And now make sure the pins are nice and straight. Because they're both the same width, they should just slide on in. All right, let's pull it out and check. This one's a little bit tighter. When it's tight, it's good to rock it back and forth. But when we pull it out, we can see the pin is not bent. That means it went in. Now let's make sure that it does work. Thankfully, these do have the SMD window, so I think I'm going to be using a lot of these on that devastating decal. That one requires a little bit more force than the Gatoron. Not that much more, but just a little bit more. But let's go ahead and, oh, that's upside down. I think. Make sure that it works. Yep. And it works just fine. So the rule for switches, if both legs are the same width, they're going to work in a Milmax or Otemu hot swap socket. If they are cherry or kale, they will not. Why? Well, for some reason, I've got a few cherries right here. They look to have what looks like a pinch. But the thing is, it's not a pinch, it's more of a groove. That leg, the right side leg, is actually a little bit thicker. And if we go to take a measurement, I don't know how well the calipers will see. All right. Oh, I guess I gotta zero it out. Then measure the right pin. Oh. So the right pin measures at 9/10 of a millimeter. And the left pin, 0.6. So basically we're dealing with a 1/2 millimeter to almost a millimeter. And if we measure, this is the NK, which I think is a Gatoron. Measure what's the right one, 0.8, and the left one, 0.8. They're the same width. So it looks like 0.8 is right at that threshold, because the 0.9 is where these won't go in when you go to the cherry. Because even if you cut the tips off on these, and let me see, can I donor one of these? I hate to donor a switch, but we'll go ahead and see. So, see, we have a wider pin on the cherry. The whole pin is wider. So just cutting the tip off, though it makes it probably a little easier to go in, it's that much wider. I mean, just literally 1/10 of a millimeter too wide, because you put it in, apply some pressure, and you got to apply pressure to this because it's not really wanting to go in. And pull it back out. I'm pretty sure it's going to be folded up. Oh, wow, never mind. I guess that's a little bit shorter than I've ever cut the cherry, but I'm surprised it actually did go in this time. I only tried it on one other cherry because I don't really like donoring my cherries. But wow, that actually worked. Just out of curiosity, that I'm finding this out as I'm filming it, so I want to check though, because that one definitely seems wider. But what if I cut off the tip? Will that work? This is a kale cream. Now, yeah, I'd love to get these to work in Otemu no max sockets, but in a donor one, though, I really don't think it's going to work. All right, so got the tip cut off at an angle. I still feel that it's too wide, but I'm gonna line it up. Oh. All right, so we've got that tip. We want to cut off the extra legs. Never go on platelets, so we don't have to worry about it. But I just, fingers crossed. Oh, it's not wanting to go in. Yeah, it's not even locking into the plate. It's preventing it. Because for some reason on the kale, that's going to be mangled. No. All right, the other pin was actually being the one that was being a bit of a pain. Now, that is one thing with these PCBs. The standard hot swap that we're used to, 3 and 5 pin with the little like S-shaped plastic piece with the 2 round holes and the clips, the standard hot swap socket. Those are actually, for the most part, only being held on by solder. Solder is meant to create an electronic connection. It's not meant to be structural in any way, shape, or form. So hot swap sockets, that's why, especially for those that are just getting into it, I always recommend opening up the keyboard and supporting the back until you get used to what kind of pressure. Once you learn, then you get much better at it. I mean, it's been many years, knock on wood, since I popped off a hot swap socket, because I kind of know the pressure, and if I have to give a little bit too much, it's like, no. But with these Temus, I mean, the chance that you have enough force to actually push that pin, because that pin has like a lip all the way around, so it's basically wider than the hole. So there's no way you can destroy your switch easily. There's no way you're going to harm the motherboard in any way, or at least I've never heard of anybody brute force breaking a Mil-Max socket. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and try this again. I've straightened out the pins, still got that one pin on the side. I'm going to push it in. Yeah, it's not on the plate all the way. I don't know why it's pushing on this one. This one should go in. Let me see if I can get a good measurement on these. I'm going to do something odd and cut the tip off of the kale switch, what is the left pin, looking at it the other way, because this seems to be what's causing issues, not the other pin. So kale switches may actually work. All right. Oh. Count my eggs before they hatch. Just out of curiosity, is it making a connection? Yeah, but it's not in there all the way. Huh. You can see, oh, I guess it's almost, it's just the tiniest amount. It's the tiniest amount not flush with the plate. I wonder, and again, this is a donor switch, but if I can actually use it, I'm going to be a happy camper. I hate losing switches. Oh, no. See, that's what ends up happening. I mean, I don't know why it was actually working, but oh, come on, where's my? I just had you guys. Because, I mean, we can't forget that these pins are connected to the leaf springs. And we can easily screw up a switch. But I'm surprised this one was actually still making connection. I'm going to cut the tip of that silver pin a little bit more and see if I can actually get it to sit all the way in. Wow. Well, shiver me. It works. And it is locked on the plate. I mean, it's the tiniest bit above it, but not that much that it's going to make a difference. And it seems to be because of the bottom of the switch. That's odd, but it's making contact and it works. So I guess the caveat is that almost any switch will work, or every switch, because I thought the cherry and the kale was the last time that I checked. This did not work. Oh, wait a minute, wrong switch. This switch. Took the space bar off. I need to put it back on, because if not, I'll keep wanting to take off the keys. All right. So we got a kale that worked. We did the cherry. Which cherry did we do? I know I volunteered. Was it the red one? No. Let's keep on trying a few switches. Now, I will say some, like this is a Texie. Is it the purple hand, I think? It's what's used for, the stem is really nice tactile, really nice Franken switch stem, in my opinion. But this one, we can actually go ahead and snip off the plastic legs. And we can see that this should slide right on in without any muss or fuss, because those are the skinnier legs, and the legs were the same size. As you can see, pins are not bent. Now, yeah, this is an HMX switch. We'll know this go in. We can test it. We tested another one, but pop off the support plastic legs. And this should slide right on in. Yep, working just fine. All right, so let's see what else we've got. So we've got this, which I believe is a Gatoron made novel keys switch. And we've already cut the tip off of it, so I'm just going to go ahead and it's on there and it's flush. No bent pins. Nice. This is a Jwick. Can't for the life of me remember the name of it. It's a very fun tactile. I've been meaning to do a switch review on it. I just haven't had the chance, but go ahead and flip off the extra pins. Goes right in. So you're going to find that actually a good number of switches actually do fit without any modification. But then we're going to come across switches like the cherry. So, like I said before, I don't think I'd cut as low. So I'm going to cut a little bit lower than I did before. This is a cherry clear. And Cherry sent me out a sample pack. They said they were going to let me review one of their keyboards. I don't know when that's happening. I hope it is soon, because I know they have a few really interesting keyboards coming out. But they did send me a switch sampler pack, and I keep meaning to do a video because they sent me a pretty cool tester along with it. Anyway, so this is a cherry clear, and I'm going to cut off that top, basically a quarter of the pin. And I'm going to do it at an angle so that it leaves like a sharp point. Now, it is right now a 3-pin switch, so we don't have to cut off the support pins. I want to make sure the pins are nice and lined up. I like to, like I said, go in from the front a little bit. Not all the way to the front, but that way you can make sure to for the pins to go in. Oh. Alright, that's locked into the plate. That's not working though. Yeah, cherries I think are going to be one that I wouldn't recommend because it looks like it works with some pins if you get lucky. But I prefer something that's a little bit, you know, more sure, especially when you're dealing with switches that, you know, that cost money. None of us really should be throwing money away if we can help it. So, yeah, I would say, I mean, if you really, really want some cherries like this one, that one's got the tip cut off and it did work. So I don't know, maybe it's because it's the, yeah, that went right in. So maybe it's the particular type of cherry. Here we have, because I do know that this is a different, I forget the specific, this is the MX2As, the ones that are clear. I'm not sure, I'm not certain, but so that one is in there and it is working. Oh, caps lock is on. So if they're cherry and they have this nylon milky bottom, can we cut off? Oh, they do. They actually look more like a Gatoron bottom than the other ones. So we grab the side cutters, cut the top quarter of the switch off, or the pin off at an angle so that we have a nice point. Make sure the pins are nice and straight. And then it's working, and so the cherry clear bottoms, they will work, but the cherry dark bottoms, they will not. So that's a nice thing to know. So we have basically the majority of switches are going to work in our Temu hot swap sockets, and I don't think they're going to go away anytime soon because, I mean, there's still a lot of keyboards that are being made, you know. Maybe they have the option of both hot swap and solder. Some of them are just solder only. And people, we like customization. I mean, a lot of us, I mean, some may just like a certain way and that's it. That's cool. They want to solder. I personally, I know I like to try different things. There's a new switch. Let me put it on my board. New keycap profile. I want to try it. So having that option of being able to quickly, I mean, comparatively, obviously, you know, changing out the keycaps and the switches on a keyboard will take some time, but it takes, I mean, 20 minutes, maybe. Soldering an entire set of switches off or desoldering them and then soldering a new set on, that's probably going to take at least an hour, hour and a half, maybe even longer, depending on your skill and your time availability. A lot of us don't just have an open window of 2 hours, 3 hours. We can sit, you know, in a tiny little room with a ventilator, soldering and desoldering with our magnifiers on. I will never wear them on here. I'm never going to wear my magnifying goggles on here because you guys will make fun of me. But I'm sure you'll make fun of me anyway, so it doesn't matter. Anyway, so we've seen here that we can take the majority of switches, including Kale, but it doesn't look like the box style switches will work. That's one thing that I don't think I was able to get. So it looks like the dark bottom cherry switches, and let me see, there is another box switch because we got the Kale cream to work. Oh, this is a box switch, but this is an older one. Speed gold, speed bronze, speed something. I'm not sure what this one is called, but it does look wider. Let me see. I even have to bother with these, but this might just be an older. All right, so we're looking at 9/10 of a millimeter versus 7/10 of a millimeter. Oh, okay, so one is wider. But if we cut the tip off, will it work? I don't think this one will work. It looks wide. It looks really wide. So I don't think box switches are going to work. Well, I guess color me corrected. It works. Oh, the pin is mangled to all hell. So I wouldn't call it that necessarily it works. That was just, we got lucky. So I'm going to say Kale box switch pins, or Kale box switches and cherry dark bottom switches won't work. Other than that, everything else that I have, and like I said, I've tested from a number of different manufacturers. Obviously the Akos, there are some Akos that I think are made by Gatoron. There are a few, but for the most part, the Akko switches are going to fit just fine. Obviously, these, the newer ones are 5 pins. These are the Akko Creamy Blue V3 Pros. So if we snip off the old support legs, took a little bit of pressure, but working just fine. Actually, sounds pretty good in this completely unmodded. It's a stock keyboard. It's one of the few that I keep stocks to compare. Yeah, it took a little bit of wrangling, but that was the case. Those pins are fine. So that's one of the newest Akko switches. So like I said, a few of the Akko switches from older ones that are 4-legged, not wing latch. And what I mean by that is Kale switches, for the most part, are wing latch. So they have basically 2 wings on either side of the switch that holds the top housing onto the bottom housing. Whereas the more popular, the cherry style switch, it has 4 legs, 2 on each side. That's why we need openers that have both the flat edge for the Kale style switches and the 4 legs for the cherry style switches. So the Akkos, the old Akkos that have that pinched, if you see the tip pinched, all you have to do is clip off that tip and it's going to fit into an Otemu socket or a Milmac socket. So if you have a board that's soldered with switches, you bought it that way, you want to unsolder it and then insert some Milmac hot swap sockets so that you can try different switches. Now you know. The only 2 switches that you'll have to avoid that I have not come across, that I've come across that do not work. And like I said, I've tested from a whole bunch of different manufacturers, a whole bunch of different types. So I'm going to see if I can make like a master list, but because some brands use different manufacturers, it might be a little hard to kind of keep track of all of it, but I don't know. I'll see. I'm not going to make any promises. But if you guys come across a switch that you thought didn't work and you do this and it does work, let me know down in the comments below. We can at least keep a running kind of discussion of what's going on. And if it's big enough, maybe I'll start something that's like a perma thread over on Reddit where, we can always talk about it and keep adding to it or put it on the wiki, whatever. So I just wanted to share that because I know personally how I felt when, I basically feel kind of like I was told, like, buzz off. You should have known better. Should know what you're buying before you buy. All they had to tell me was like, oh, some switches work in Otemu, some don't. The ones you bought don't. That's all. I would have eaten. I didn't ask for a refund. If they were broken or something was wrong, yes, I wanted switches that work. But had they just explained to me that some switches work and some switches don't, and actually, provide me like a link to something that said that, I would have been like, okay, well, I bought switches that don't work. I did eventually buy a keyboard with that I knew had Kale hot swap sockets so that, I could use those switches. That was my excuse. I'll get that keyboard so I can actually finally use those switches, even though it came with switches. But, we all make excuses to justify our spending habits, but hey, as long as we can afford it, it's all good. So anyway, I I wanted to make this video, like I said, for a little while because it is a question that does continue to come up. There's still a lot of these Otemu boards out there. I feel that there's going to be a lot of these Otemu boards for probably years to come. And as long as they make, soldered keyboards, and keyboard kits using the Milmac sockets, you can, still enjoy the taste of different switches without having to spend a whole afternoon on soldering and desoldering these switches. And then, testing and, one doesn't work, having to go back and replace, So I will be, like I said, it's probably going to be till after the holidays. I will come back and I'm going to do a full build video on the devastating TKL, WKL that I got. I do have another solder board I'm going to do before that for Keebs, because he sent it to me a while ago and I just haven't had the chance to get to it. Plus I ended up just having to get a whole new solder station. My solder gun was it worked when it felt like it. So now I've got it. I've got everything, so I don't have any excuses. So I need to build that before I get to the devastating. But with the devastating, with Keebs, I just gotta install the hot swap sockets. But with and I'm actually going to try something. I've got an idea on that, but that's for when I get to that. But for the devastating TKL, I'm going to do a full build as well as show the best way to install Milmac sockets into and solder them to a PCB with a fair amount of ease, and it shouldn't take more than, once you get into the groove on it, because I basically insert switches and pins all onto the PCB, tape everything down, flip it over, and go to town. Once I get into a groove, it can take me 30 seconds for one switch. Some may be a little difficult and take a little bit longer. Some will be a little easier. So it shouldn't take too long. And like I said, then have the ability to not only take advantage of trying out different switches, but also switching up my layout, because I do know it has a couple different layouts, step caps, due to sang and bottom row. So we'll get to play around with that. Anyway, I do hope that this answered questions for anybody. I know now at least I can point to this video as opposed to others that, maybe I got too much in the weeds. I'll do a short. So the short will just kind of show that, hey, you can take these switches, you can put in the Otemus, this is what you got to do. And just be the short version of this. But this is the extended version. But most switches, short of what I can find and what you guys can find if you want to help me, the ones that will not work, even if you do the clipping of the right leg, and when I say the right leg, I mean when the pins are facing you, are the cherry switches with black bottoms and the kale box switches. Because even the kale cream, which is just a standard switch, not a box switch, we were able to do it and it works. Now we had to cut them a little bit shorter, and I'm almost positive, and I'm just going to go ahead and do it even though I was already closing out. I think that, not that I'm not a big fan of box switches, but I think that if we cut both of the legs short, they probably might work. So cut the tip off the other one. Let me see. Fit nicely. It works. So, if you're willing to cut the pins that short, it kind of worries me. But if it's working, you can't really complain. Is it going to have issues in other hot swap sockets? I'm not sure. They probably will, because it does do some funky thing to that right leg because it's wider, but it's making contact. So, and it's locked into the plate. So technically, even kale box switches will work, but you'll have to kind of sacrifice them to that keyboard, basically, or unless you're going to always keep them in Otemu sockets. But like I said, I don't know how much hurt that right pin can take before it just breaks off or does something, moves off axis and messes up the alignment of the leaf springs inside that they're connected to. So always a word of caution with that. You know, always try it out on one switch, make sure that it works for you, you know, before doing a whole bag of switches and going, oh, it didn't work, and now my switches don't work. And, you know, we all got to take responsibility for what we do. I'm trying to give you guys a guide, hoping that it'll save people the frustration and just the, I mean, I honestly felt like a heel. The way it was responded, the way that I was treated, you know, when I didn't know. I just, like, the pin is a pin is a pin is a pin, you know, and if it's hot swap, then it's hot swap. I didn't know that for some reason, and what the reason is, I don't know. Maybe it is because they're stronger, but the right pin is always softer, even if they're wider. So I don't know what the reason could be for them making that decision to make one pin wider, if not only for the reason not to fit in these. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of, because Kale, what I can remember, were the first that didn't, you know, work. I don't have any older Gatorons or original Cherry, so I can't say how those pins are. If you guys do, maybe you can put down in the comments below. But I do know that Kale came up with the hot swap sockets that are used in practically all keyboards. I don't know if they have a patent or anything on it, because I know other companies are now using that same style, including Otomo, if I'm not mistaken. But like I said, for keyboards that don't have the cutouts for those type of hot swap sockets, the 3305s, the 7705s are going to work. And as we've seen, almost all switches will work. The Cherries with the milky bottoms will work if you cut the top of the right pin off. Gatoron switches, they will work if you cut the top quarter of the pin on the right off. So novel keys, if you cut the top pin on the right, they will work. Any switch, I mean, this is a, I didn't try this one, this is a TTC. This is a Cerulean, I think. What is this? No, this is a Duroc. All right, yeah, this is a Duroc. This has the pinch, just like the Gatoron switches do. See, that pin is pinched at the top. So if I come with the side cutters and take that top off, do a little bit more. Make sure the pins are straight. Will this Duroc fit? Oh, wait a minute. It's not going to fit if I don't take off the extra legs. It's a clear switch. I kind of just didn't see the support pins. That's why I wouldn't go in. I was going to say, all right, make sure these pins are straight. You can see how they're actually, you know, basically a tail off of the leaf spring inside of the switch. All right, they look straight enough. Put it in. Oh, they went right in. Yep. Nice, just like the Gatorons. All I had to do was clip the top part off. So I do hope that this helped anybody out there that is going and asking questions and wondering, why don't my switches fit? Like, I mean, I've seen a lot of people, oh, I got, you know, X switch and I've got this keyboard and it's just not working and this is what's happening. I know exactly how you feel because I was there. And not only did I feel bad for not knowing, I kind of felt bad for the way I was kind of told I should have known better. And it's like, it's not published anywhere that I can speak. I mean, unless, you know, deep in some videos, deep in some blogs, deep in some forum threads. Yeah, but it's not something that the manufacturers definitely, I mean, when they were using the Otomo or the guys who make the switches that don't fit in the Otomo, they weren't saying anything about it. There were some vendors that did, but very few. So it's just, like I said, I don't know. I don't really, honestly, I don't care why some pins don't work. And if you don't want me to use your switches, I won't use your switches. So if it's harder to use, Yeah. I mean, I don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of the Kale Cream. I'm a tactile guy, but this was one of my first really favorite linears. This, well, probably it was a tie between this and the Milky Yellow, but I really do like cream. I like cream, but I haven't really found any other kale switches I like. I really just haven't, box-wise or standard. Just don't. I love Gatorade switches. I love cherry switches. And I love Akko switches. I think they just bring good stuff to the game at a good price. My favorite probably remains the U4Ts, but those were the first, like I thought all tactiles were like browns, and I'd only tried really a handful of really cheap tactiles. So when I got a set of U4Ts, when I was like, all right, screw it, I'm going to break down and get a set just enough for a 65%. And I spent the money and I was like, oh, okay, I get it. And I just love that sharp tactility. Since then, I've been more, I mean, that was, before then, heck, I was fine with clickies. I'm still okay with some clickies. But I really became a tactile person. I was whatever switches, whatever. But the day I tried a U4T, I became a tactile guy. But don't get me wrong, there's still some linear switches I like. I am really liking the HMX switches, especially some of them. I don't know what they're doing with the mix of materials, but they're getting, some are a little bit more high pitched, some of them are a little bit deeper. Obviously, the case has a lot to do with the end sound profile. But now you know that you can either take out that Red Dragon, that Iyusu, that numerous boards that came with these type of sockets, and you can go ahead and load them up with some good switches. Get to modding them, because I mean this keyboard you'll probably find is the one I've modded the most on my channel, because I have had so many. I've built a lot for friends, and I enjoy the simplicity. Yes, it's a steel, it's tray mounted, it's not something for long-term use, but it's a fun board nonetheless. But anyway, I hope this helped you guys with your journey into the mechanical keyboard rabbit hole. If you have any questions, you come across any switches that this helped you with, or that doesn't work when they're clipped, and you're willing to sacrifice some switches, as I was able to do today. I mean, it's only a couple. I got this one's got the crush pin, but I bet even with the crush pin, it's going to work. Yep. So even though it's got a mangled pin, the box switch Kale will work. So, I mean, it's definitely not going to work in another keyboard. It's only going to work in Otemu. It's Otemu only now. But we went through, and really the only ones that are going to give some true trouble are the dark bottom cherry switches. Those are the ones that, not only for the price, but just not something you want to be destroying for no reason. Those would be the only ones that I'd really avoid. And if you're okay with turning your Kale box switches into Otemu only switches, or Milmax only switches, then. But Milmax switches are available on Amazon, ringerkeys.com, AliExpress, of course. But I will share the ones that I have when we get to that point, and I'm going to do the devastating. So I do hope this answered your questions, but if you have any more, please put them down below. For now, I'm just going to wish everybody out there in YouTube land an amazing rest of your day. And until the next transmission, keep calm and keyboard on.